So great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And on the line today, all the way from Portugal, Joop van der Voort. And Joop, you are the CEO at Remote, and
Yes, that's
you
correct.
were the VP of product at GitLab. So
Yeah.
that's pretty interesting for, I think, what, how long, 6 years?
5 years, yeah, from the founding of the company GitLab until January 2019.
All right, so we'll get into that. But before we do that, I want to talk about what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Yeah, I do most of my work in my house, in my basement, in an office so when we bought this house, we specifically looked for a house where we'd have an office space. And so my office is quite extensive in that sense. So in terms of hardware, it's quite a big space that I have here in my house. I have many screens and many computers. It's an embarrassing amount. We published a blog post about this on our website yesterday.
And I will put it in the show notes because it
Yeah,
links to all the things that you use. So
yeah.
yeah.
I think most notably, I work from a big Mac. I like a desktop computer, so I use a Mac Pro with a Pro display, which is extremely nice. And yeah, I mean, this is like for me the place where I spend most of my time. So I'm continuously looking for ways to upgrade it. I think, we were talking right before we started recording. I think the chair is probably the most important part for me because it's a good chair that's very comfortable. But yeah, it's quite a fancy setup. And, as a business, we are all remote, so our office consists mostly of Zoom and Slack and Notion.
Okay. So you're all remote at Remote, the name of your company. And Remote, it says on your website, you take care of global payroll, benefits, compliance, and taxes for remote workers. So tell us a bit about Remote and what you do and why you started it.
Sure, yeah. I'll start with the history of it. So before I was at GitLab, which is one of the largest all-remote companies in the world. I think it was there until everybody was forced to work remotely. And there, we never had any offices from day one, essentially. And so whenever we would look for a new person to join the team, we would just hire the best person we could find, independent of where they were. And every time we were faced with the same problem is, you hire someone in a country where you've never hired someone else. How do you pay them? And how do you make sure that it's legal and it works well for everybody? And as many organizations, we started out by hiring people as contractors. But for one, if you hire someone as full-time employee, you legally can't make them a contractor. You have to give them an employment agreement. And to do that, you have to have a local entity, essentially have a local company in a country where they live. Now, that's undoable if you hire people in 50, 60 different countries, especially if your company is essentially a software startup. And so,
Yeah.
we tried all sorts of ways to work around it, but none was like satisfactory, and all solutions were always expensive and complicated. And so when I eventually left GitLab, I decided to solve that problem once and for all. And that's exactly what Remote does. So the idea of the business is that you want to hire someone in a different country. You come to us, you tell us, I want to hire Jane. She lives in Portugal. And then what we do is Remote has offices all around the world, or entities all around the world. And we locally employ Jane. We take care of payroll, any benefits you want to provide her, compliance, and everything else that comes with locally employing someone. And we present you with the invoice. So what it means is that we operate as an employer of record. And it means that you can legally hire someone in a country and they have a normal local employment agreement, so they can get a mortgage and take a loan and those.
Right. Right, because those kind of things are extremely important. Like if
Yes.
you want to, of course, I just bought a house. I know myself what kind of a drama that is, especially if you're a freelancer and entrepreneur. Man, the paperwork was insane. So that sounds like a big task, like to know all the different labor laws of all the various different countries. How did you do that? Or is
Yeah.
that the secret? Is that the secret sauce you can't reveal?
No, it's, what the thing is that it's the opposite. It's not a secret. Like, it is incredibly bureaucratic and slow process. So in each country, we have to enter the country, by figuring out, can we operate in this country? What are the local labor laws like? How do you create an entity in this country? And then how do you do payroll? And so we start with that from the get-go, because we only operate our entities. We don't work with third parties. And we always have to have a local entity. So yeah, we just start from scratch, and it's like literally start researching. Like often, like the first step is literally Googling, how do I start a company in this country? And then we go from there. And it's, you know, it is not at all a secret. It's just incredibly painful. It's an incredibly painful process to go through. It is hard to do in like a country that you are not familiar with, or you don't speak the language. It is infinitely harder to do so for all countries in the world, which is our ambition. And that's the thing. Like, we are motivated by thinking, we do it so everybody else doesn't have to do it. And to give you an example, we just opened our French entity. So we're starting to accept customers that want to employ people in France in about a week from now. And it took us more than 8 months just to set it up. Like, and that is like
Wow.
not 8 months of waiting. It's like every week we had to send in some document, had to have some conversation, do something.
Wow. So then for people who are hiring remote workers, if you're hiring somebody as a freelancer, no big deal. You can hire, they have to take care of their own stuff in their country. But if you want somebody that's an actual employee, that's where you start running into problems. And that is the problem that you guys solved.
Yeah,
Did I get that
exactly
right?
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I can imagine, yeah, you want employees at a certain point, or yeah, for whatever reason. So what is the hesitation with companies? Why wouldn't they do this?
Why wouldn't they do it themselves, you mean?
No, I mean, why? Yeah, well, why wouldn't they come to you and say, like, what are the objections that you're, yeah, I'm sure you're like, "No, of course they wouldn't." But I mean, there must
Well,
be like, what are the concerns when companies come to you?
yeah, I think so. There's a few. For one, what we're seeing is that there is immense demand for this, so they do come to us. But I think the biggest struggles companies have is that they don't know. They don't know what to do. Yeah, they hire they want to hire someone great. They happen to live in a country they have no idea about. They don't even know where to get started. Right. This
Yeah.
is one of our challenges. Is like telling companies, one is that you probably need this because you want to be compliant locally, or maybe you are not able to hire someone because you are not offering a local employment. But the concerns that they have and the questions that they have are around, how do I deal with taxes? How expensive? Like, the first question is always, how much does it cost, right?
Of course. Of
and
course.
this can be very surprising. Other questions are, what do I offer people? If you have a US company, you are very used to offering people healthcare benefits. In most countries that we operate in, people are not very interested in that because either the government provides it, or it's just something that is like relatively low cost and just part of something you do personally. So the questions vary very much, but those are the very important ones. And then many organizations are worried about, how do I stay compliant locally? How does it work employing someone there? Can I, what is the process of letting someone go, or what happens if they get sick? And it turns out that every country in the world is basically made up their own mind about how they deal with these things, and it's always different. It's never the same across
Ha!
the country. Uh,
Darn.
yeah.
Every time you're like, ah, another change. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but also in most countries, it's, once you start to understand how the country operates, you can understand why they do things in a particular way. It is never, to the point where it's ridiculous, but all countries have some of their own idiosyncrasies.
Right. Sort of what makes it all beautiful, I guess, in the end,
I
right?
suppose
It's
so.
all the differences. So I'm assuming then you have dealt with hiring a lot of remote workers with your experience at GitLab and with remote.com. What are some what I'll point this at a two-part question. You can attack it any way you wish, but what are some of the things that employers should be like? How do you hire a good remote worker? What are the things that you need to look for when you're hiring somebody, and then how do you find them?
Yeah. So I will start with, how do you usually start? How do you find a remote worker? It's very easy. The demand for remote work, even today, is significantly higher than the availability of it. So it means that if you're looking for a remote worker, it suffices to literally tweet about it in many cases, which is what we do ourselves. Like we just tweet about like we have a position, it's remote, especially if the geography is very, if you don't really care about where someone lives, you will see so many people applying to your position, so much so that you might have a challenge of like sorting through all the different applications, which makes it important that you have a good hiring process in place.
So there's so much demand for people looking for remote jobs that all you need to do is tweet and say, we've got a job, who wants it? And then you've got a huge demand. Amazing.
That works really well for us, and especially if you're able to target some people in the right industry, right? Like so, for instance, my co-founder Marcelo is well known in the engineering community, and in particular in the kind of technologies that we use. So if he tweets, "We're looking for an engineer," the right people are already following him, and they might retweet it, and it spreads really quickly. Or you might send something like that on LinkedIn, but again, the demand for remote work and like for well-paid remote work is just incredible that it is relatively easy to find people.
Okay. And what do you look for in people then? What makes a good remote worker?
Yeah, I always find this funny because it's basically the same as a person in the office, which is, besides the obvious, like, is this a person that can actually perform the kind of job that we're hiring them for? I think in remote work, there's a few extra things that are in particularly important. And it's on a high level communication skills. Of course, in office, this matters maybe as much, but in remote work, the ability to write well, right? So written communication is in particular very important, and this goes from style to just great understanding to being to write thoughts and ideas down clearly. If you're not able to do that, it's very hard to practice good remote work standards, which is documenting things and communicating sometimes only in written text.
Right, especially if the language being spoken isn't your mother tongue, then it's especially difficult to write in another language. I mean, I'm going through it myself in terms of learning Dutch, and speaking, people know what I mean. But when you write it, I just look like I'm like a 5-year-old child, and it's a really embarrassing. So yeah, I can imagine that it's a super skill. Okay, so beyond communication skills, what else would you look for?
Yeah, beyond that, it's almost the same as a job in the office, right? It's just, is this someone that can perform the kind of job that I do? Do the skills match? And are they able to perform it? Right? There's like the bar there is, in addition to the things you would expect from someone in office, is like, do they have a good internet setup, and are they able to figure themselves out when their laptop breaks? Right? Like that's basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, beyond that, it just depends on the role and exactly what you're looking for. But I think those, like basic, digital fluency and great communication skills are the things that are in particular very important when hiring remotely.
Right. I can totally imagine. So, remote.com, your company has around 25, 26 people, I think you said, that are working all over the globe, the US, from the US to Europe. What are the challenges that you guys face in terms of working together as an all remote team, or even at your experience with GitLab? What were the challenges?
Yeah, I think there's a number of challenges, and some of them in particular now that there's a global pandemic.
Yeah, it's a weird time right now in
Yeah.
history. Yeah.
I always say like the biggest challenge that remote organizations have, especially if you're only remote, right, where there's no offices, is bonding and building a company culture. So because you don't have these accidental interactions and these things, you walk into the office and you have 100 micro interactions before you even sit at your desk. All of that is gone in a remote setting, and you have to somehow regain some of that, and like same as with water cooler moments. And so creating opportunities for that is very challenging, and that is made particularly difficult if you have many people in many different time zones, because then
Right.
the actual work, collaborating on content and such, the tools exist for that, and the tools are great, and they do a really good job, but it's not sufficient to create a great company where you want to not just have people check off to-do lists. You want them to be creative. You want them to be collaborative. And for that to work well, you have to build that culture. And that requires, sometimes talking with each other about things that are not work, or like work adjacent. Or, you have a conversation with someone and the context is not necessarily meeting, but the context is nothing. It's not a meeting. It's just we're having coffee together, or we just talk about a shared interest. And that is a big challenge we have. And we do a lot of things at Remote to help with that and to combat that. Previously, we would meet up in person, and slowly here and there we're trying to redo that again. Of course, trying to be very safe. But yeah, meeting up with the whole company, for example, is not going to happen until likely there's a vaccine available.
Right. Especially if you have a lot of workers in the US right now, because that seems to look quite dramatic. So for people who are listening, we're recording at the end of June 2020.
Yeah.
So just for context, we don't know what's going to happen, but
Yeah.
things don't look so good, but we're hoping for the best. So how has COVID changed the culture of your company, or has it at all?
I don't think it has changed the culture, mostly because the company grew the most while COVID was already well on its way. So we grew a lot in the past 4 or 5 months or so. So that means that most people have joined during the pandemic, and so there was never an opportunity to meet them in person. So for most people in the company, I don't know how tall they are, other than
Right.
like a rough estimate. So it hasn't really changed the company. But before the pandemic, what we did is we tried to meet up a lot, and we encourage people to meet up locally. So if you are living near a coworker, there was always a budget available for you, for instance, to have lunch together, or to spend a day working together, maybe get a co-working space if you needed that. And yeah, we can't do that anymore. So that is very unfortunate. And so what we started to do is we started to do many more online activities and online team bonding kind of things. And so, the team really got into Pictionary. So there's this, you can play
Huh.
Pictionary very easily online. And they're very competitive. I think it actually happens today, right after we are done calling. I think there's another Pictionary session, and it's a whole tournament now. As an example, and there's several other activities that they do, and I think that is one of the things that has increased a lot. That the team really started bonding around those kind of activities, more so. Whereas before we would try to meet up in person more.
Awesome. And are you finding that your team is having the video conference fatigue or Zoom fatigue? I'm not sure what you use for your calls, but
I think we have very strict guidelines around meetings. So we discourage recurring meetings, for example, as much as possible. They have to be strictly necessary. And in general, we try to reduce meetings as much as we can. We find that if you have a lot of meetings, you tend to waste a lot of time. And so you should always ask yourself, can this meeting be an email, or a message, or a piece of documentation? And so, yeah, we had a few cases where we felt like there were too many meetings, and we addressed it and changed the company policy to follow that. And so that prevents it. I think that's the best way to go about it, to be honest. If your day is full of
yeah,
meetings, it's very tiring, and it removes like one of the greatest powers of remote work, which is like this forced flexibility, where because not everybody is on the same schedule, you can't set working hours, and because you can't set working hours, everybody now works flexibly. So if you start to have a lot of meetings, yeah, you lose that superpower for remote work, and that's unfortunate. So yeah, we try to the time that we spend in meetings, yeah, it should either be for bonding reasons, or just for like real active collaborative reasons, or like there is something we have to discuss, there's no other way, or there's like it requires significant back and forth.
yeah.
But if it's not for those kind of reasons, we try to not have full meetings.
Yeah, I really think that that's the key at the moment to this whole Zoom or video conferencing fatigue, is you got to go asynchronous and split that bit out,
Yep.
and just more deep work, more focus kind
Yep.
of things. So what are the tools that you guys use? You had mentioned before Slack, and I think Notion, and I don't remember the other ones.
Yeah, we use Slack, Notion very extensively. We use GitLab for all our development work and everything else. And then, we use the Google suite of tools. We try to not use too many tools. It's very easy to get overwhelmed with them, and you'll have to maintain all of them. And, we
Yeah.
are, a company that deals with a lot of private information. Everything has to be really locked down. So we can't use many tools for that reason. Yeah, I think that's basically it. Yeah, we use a few tools that are specific to our industry, around contracts and signing and such. But not too many other things. One thing, we are looking. One thing that we do, we have this room, which is like a permanent Zoom room, and so that means that, and we call it the Hangout. So if you feel like just hanging with your colleagues or like working while having other people around you and be able
Hmm.
to talk with them, you can go to the Hangout. And there we've been switching tools a lot. So we tried different tools. We tried Tandem. We tried to have a permanent Zoom room, which was not well meant, good to do. And we were using Whereby for a while, which is quite nice. I believe now people are trying Discord for that.
Hmm.
We already had a Discord group because we used it to play games together, and I think now people are using that for the Hangout. So that's one area where like we're not fully resolved yet on like what kind of tool we can use.
Oh, let me recommend a virtual office like Sococo or Remo or something like that. That could be totally awesome.
Yeah, we consider those. The problem with those kind of things, like for us, having video is very nice, but it should also be a tool that's easy on the background and have just a single room. So yeah, we've been
Mm.
going back and forth. I think as the company grows, maybe we'll move to a solution like that where it's worthwhile having multiple like virtual offices. Um, yeah, it's we've never found like a great tool. Like we find that it's hard because you want to be able to support all browsers because people choose their own favorite browser. And yeah, it's that's an
Yeah.
area where we keep going back and forth.
Yeah, it's a tough one to solve, but it does bring up an interesting issue. And I wanted to ask, like, do you have any kind of like team agreement in place for how you're going to work together, or does it just evolve naturally? People just choose, you offer this suite of tools, and this is what people can use, or how do you align as a team?
Yeah, we have strict choices around where we work. So, um, you know, anything related to the development of our software happens in GitLab and nowhere else, right? So you might have a discussion elsewhere, but then the conclusion goes into GitLab, right? Like that is the single source of truth for everything related to that. For almost all other parts of the organization, we use Figma very intensely. So our designers, their single source of truth is inside of Figma. So their tasks go through Notion. They use
Mhm.
Notion for tasks, but then their single source of truth where they collaborate as well is in Figma itself. And then for almost all the other teams, everything they do is in Notion. So they use it for tasks, they use it for documentation, and it's also where we have our company handbook as well. So, and we are very strict about which tools to use and which not to use, because if you allow everybody to use whatever tools they want, which in itself is great. It's nice that you want to give people freedom, but if it comes to sharing information and putting information somewhere, it has to be discoverable and editable by everybody in the organization. So if you have many different tools, yeah, and then you have to create a meta tool to then search through all of those things, which is it's not efficient. So we are very
Right.
prescriptive about those kind of things, and we try to restrict which tools we use for what.
That makes sense. What about how do you prevent at remote? How do you prevent burnout, or how do you see when somebody is working way too much? Because there's some people right now stuck in their apartments. They don't have families or pets or anything, and it's like, okay, well, I can watch a movie, but then the rest of maybe I'm going to work on the weekends, and I can imagine that work and life sort of bleed into each other at some point. Is that an issue?
I think it is an issue for everybody that works remotely, especially if you work from home. So I also think that the solution is not tools. I think the solution is managing people. And I think if you're a good manager and you have regular one-on-ones with your report, and you make those one-on-ones not about the work that is being done and the contents of the work, but you make them about the performance, the happiness, the well-being of the person and of the relationship between manager and report and the rest of the team. Those kind of things come to light much faster, or at least more obviously, than through a tool. So yeah, I'm really not, I'm interested in tools that help you get an understanding of how your team is doing and how it is performing. But I think, you know, managing someone is more impactful, and is the solution to these kind of things. And then, you know, as a manager, if you see that someone is not doing well, it's up to you to deal with it. But it usually means encouraging them to take time off, or forcing them sometimes to take off.
Right, right. But you're right. Like the human touch, I think, is incredibly important in those situations. Like tools are great for measuring and status and those things, but at some point when somebody's suffering, you want to get in as a human touch. So we're reaching the end of the time, but man, that went fast. But I do have a couple more questions. One question is, why do you like working remotely so much? What's in it for you personally?
Yeah, for me, I don't really understand the opposite. I've never really understood why I would go to a place and then do the same thing as I could do from home, which cost me a lot of time to go there. It takes a lot of flexibility for my life, and even like, I think not working remote, like I think working remotely gives you a lot of freedom that otherwise is lost. And I think you can't pay me enough to take that much freedom from me. So
Yeah,
that is it for me. You know, I have a young daughter. I want to spend time with her, and I want to be flexible for her. You know, it's I bring her to school every day or to daycare, and pick her up every day. I have always breakfast with her. I always have dinner with her, and you know, in the weekends, everything, you know, because she goes to daycare. But no, it's those kind of things. I have lunch every day with my wife. Like that's invaluable.
yeah.
Like you literally cannot pay me enough for me to go back to an office and be restricted to a particular, you know, a time, and to not be able to do whatever I want in the middle of the day.
Yeah, I'd have to be in a really bad spot to go back to the office ever again. I'd have to be desperate.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't say never, but because you know, life, you never know with life.
yeah, yeah.
But you're right. You'd have to pay me a lot, or I'd have to be very desperate to do it. So, all right. So let's see. Two more questions. So one is, if you have it, what would be your advice for people who are just starting out? Like they've never worked remotely before, they're looking for a remote job. What would you advise them to do?
If you're looking for a remote job,
Tweet about it. No.
well, yes, actually, yes. Yeah, I think that's a really good start. Like, be vocal about what you can be, what you can do, what you're interested in. Reach out to people in your network. You know, those are usually the easiest ways to get in somewhere. Um, Also, you know, if you're in a luxurious position where, you know, for instance, a software engineer, or just you know, for positions that are in high demand, then look at the companies, and look how they talk about their company culture, and look at how, you know, if you're in an interviewing process, ask them how they deal with these kind of things that we discussed today. Like, you know, what if someone is burned out? Like, how do you manage people? How many reports does a manager have on average? You know, if it's more than 10, it's usually problematic. It means that someone will never have enough time for you. So
Right.
this can be a long conversation in itself, but I think like evaluating a company is very important. And I understand that, you know, some people are desperate for these kind of remote jobs, but not all companies are doing it well today. And it's worthwhile spending your time investigating whether a company is actually the kind of company you want to work for. Because what you don't want is your first remote job to be working for a place where you feel isolated, right? The company should reach out to you and make you feel welcome and make you feel part of the team. And if they're not doing that, then it's not going to be a very good experience.
Right.
And I think,
Or if,
you know, more and more companies will do this better, especially starting this year.
yeah.
So, you know, I think those jobs will start to appear where, you know, people can actually find these kind of jobs.
Yeah, or I was going to say a company that does like keyboard tracking or snapshots, you know, like the
Yeah,
sort of not trusting that you're doing work. Because I thought, man, you know, I run my own company now, but if somebody were to monitor my keyboard strokes or take a picture of like what I'm doing at all times, my productivity goes way up and way down, just depending on like, did I sleep well last night? Is it too hot outside? You know, those kind of things. So I just can't imagine that that would be nice to work for a place that does something like that. Indeed.
yeah. I think that's an extremely strong signal that this is a company that does not understand things and does not respect its employees, right? If you feel the need to screenshot your monitor that, oh yeah, don't work for a company like that.
Yeah. I had one guy argue that there were some companies that were so hesitant to go remote that they said, okay, to dip your toes in the water, we'll let you monitor your employees for now, just to make the transition easier for you. And I thought, all right, I can kind of see the argument, but it's such a distasteful, as a person, like to have such a lack of trust from the place that you're working in, just leaves a bad taste all around, I think. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think it happens a lot in businesses where, they might not have managers, or the managers are not very good. So I understand why people are looking for these kind of solutions, but it just, it highlights an underlying problem. The underlying problem being you're not managing people, or you're not
right,
structuring the way you work well, because of everyone at remote, I can see exactly what they've been doing today, not because I have spyware installed, but because all their work is just available inside of GitLab, inside of Notion. And it's not to say that I'm checking on people, no, because they all have managers, and those managers, they work with them and they know whether they're doing a good job, because the work is something we're all building together. So like, these things are obvious, and you don't have to look at stats necessarily to
right,
see how someone is performing if you work with them every day. So yeah,
right.
uh,
Another situation in which you don't need a tool, and that the
yeah.
human touch is really important. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to use good tools to do your work, and those good tools will allow you to do that, right? Like if you use something like GitLab, yeah, everything is available. You don't have to use an additional tool to see whether the work is getting done.
right, right. Love it. So, okay, I have two more questions. Yeah, I know I said, but I just have one. In terms of like, what would be a top productivity tip? What have you learned? What have you done for yourself that really helps you? Like on those days where you're just like, it's going to be hard today. How do you get yourself up and running and motivated? Or what are some of your productivity hacks?
Yeah, I think the biggest trick is to leverage flexibility. If you have a day where you're not doing a particular good job, or like you're just not able to get started, don't. Like, go for a walk, play a game or something. Like someday you can't always go full speed. Like that, for me, that's been the biggest change in my life, to stop fighting, feeling myself wanting to procrastinate, and just accepting, okay, it's not happening, I can try again later today. Like, or setting a mental mark, like this morning it's not happening, I'm going to try again after lunch. And to me that makes a huge difference. There's other tricks that work really well. For me it's coffee, and just
Love it.
the break of making coffee. So I have this whole ritual, and then trying to make it very good. I have a standing desk, so switching to standing really helps for me a lot. And switching environment sometimes helps, right? I tend to advise people to have a very separate work environment from their life. So separate office or a space specific in your house where you only do work, and when you're done, you don't go there. But sometimes it helps to just, grab your laptop and sit on the couch, sit somewhere else in the house, go to the park, and work from there if you can. It might
Yeah.
also be helpful.
Yeah, indeed. Switching up the environment can really do a lot for the brain. Or just getting fresh air also is really good. All right, last question, I promise, and an easy one. So if people want to learn more about you and connect with you, what's the best place to do that? I will obviously link to remote.com on the website. Super easy to remember. Awesome. Bravo on that URL, by the way.
Thank
Brilliant.
you.
But
Easiest way to reach me is on Twitter. It's my first name, Job, and then VO. It doesn't get easier than that.
that is pretty easy. And I'll, of course, link that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for your time today. I have copious tips here for people. So the show notes should be really rich. And I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks, Lisanne.
All right. Until next time, everybody, be powerful.